Here's another one of the board members, Rachel Kleinfeld. Now, this is a real piece of work as well. Now, Rachel Kleinfeld first came on my radar before her role in the world well predates the censorship industrial complex. You guys used to ask me this in office hours like 2 years ago. I remember we used to talk about this. It would come up pretty often about this CIA Democrats phenomenon. How did Democrats become the party of war? Democrats were the anti-war party during Vietnam. Even during the Clinton era, the Clinton era was not really a period marked by a whole lot of kinetic war. The Clinton Democrats, yes, they initiated NATO expansion in 1998, 1999, but they did that when Russia was weak and they were exploiting the window of opportunity because they knew that Russia could not fight back as Boris Yeltsin tumbled. And what really happened is in the early 2000s, when Bush won with the backing of the military-industrial complex, and then Bush won again in 2004 as a military-industrial complex figure, Democrats decided they needed to be in the business of the military-industrial complex if they wanted to win elections. And so what emerged was this Democrat vehicle called the Truman National Security Project, which was because this was a big divide in the 20th century. The military-industrial complex, yes, it had some Democrat tentacles, but it was majority Republican. We were fighting against communism. And while there were neoliberal capitalist leftists who did a lot of war profiteering as the Yankees, the cowboys were it was basically big oil, big multinational corporation, Chamber of Commerce, and big military that formed the power base, the donor base, the permanent Washington power structure of the Republican Party, as opposed to the Democrats, which had all the labor unions, had the media, had culture, had art and activists, had universities. The Democrats really didn't have as much of a toehold in the military-industrial complex until this early 2000s pivot centered around the Truman National Security Project, run by Rachel Kleinfeld, that got Democrats deep in the business of the military-industrial complex, where they are to this day. Now, 100% of Democrats vote for war against Russia, and only a third of House Republicans. There's a debate in the Republican Party about whether we keep funding Ukraine. There's no debate in the Democrats. It's because of this reorientation around the Truman National Security Project. Now, the Truman National Security Project really came on my radar in a big way when I wrote this viral piece that Tucker covered and Pete Hegseth covered. Pete Hegseth actually took action on this. Pete Hegseth, after I published this piece, ended up getting Bishop Garrison fired. That was my first run with Pete Hegseth. Bishop Garrison. I published this piece in May 2021. This is called Meet Bishop Garrison, the Pentagon's hatchet man in charge of purging MAGA patriots and installing race theory in the military. So this guy, Bishop Garrison, was supposed to be the independent, nonpartisan arbiter of extremism in the military when they were trying to purge the military of all Trump supporters after January 6th, put in right away by Biden. In his whole Twitter feed, I went to check it out after I saw the reporting on this, and I just pulled all these tweets. It's crazy. I mean, it was like, if you support the president, you support, you're a racist, misogynist, extremist. You're complicit if you're willing to follow him and not speak out. Hashtag Black 44. This is the head of the Countering Extremism Task Force for the U.S. military, the senior advisor to the Secretary of Defense on DEI. If you guys remember this, what they defined as insider threats at DOD at the time under Bishop Garrison. Patriot extremism. If you believe some laws are unjust, I think I clipped these. Yeah, this is what Bishop Garrison from the Truman National Security Project determined was domestic extremism. The ideology holds that the U.S. government has become corrupt and has overstepped its constitutional boundaries. If you believe that, if you believe our government's corrupt and has overstepped the Constitution, you are now a domestic extremist. Symbols of extremism. Pepe. It's okay to be white, and the ISIS flag. Stop what you're doing and read this about the 1619 Project. And it goes on and on and on and on. Steve Miller, that heinous views. Do not allow the media to give an audience to Stephen Miller in the name of both sides. Conclusive, indisputable evidence that Stephen Miller is a white nationalist. Does anyone believe Stephen Miller is anything other than a white supremacist? The deafening silence of veteran service organizations on Black Lives Matter. Bill Maher is a racist. Everyone's racist. Everything's racist. Now, because Bishop Garrison came out of Rachel Kleinfeld's Truman National Security Project, I ended up doing a very deep dive on the Truman National Security Project at that time. I think it's covered in the second piece I wrote on Bishop Garrison. And look, again, Pete Hegseth ended up getting this guy fired through some connections in the military that he had. So good on Pete Hegseth. That was while we were out of power. I don't even know how he did that. Probably leveraged Congress. Bishop Garrison was making sure to target gray areas such as reading, following, and liking extremist material and content in social media forums. And so if you like a Pepe post, you're out of the military. Okay, so she got her start in this weird interstitial zone between NATO, the CIA, and the military-industrial complex, and the sticky NGO thicket that exists around it. So let me get back to her background here. It says, doctor. Oh, doctor. Oh, you're a doctor, are you? Tell me about the patients you've treated. She advises governments, philanthropists, of course. This just means like spook academic. She advises governments, philanthropists, and activists on how democracies make major social change. The government's soliciting money from foundations to astroturf political movements. She got her bachelor's from Yale, that Yale thing, and she was a Rhodes Scholar. Following in the Clinton School of CIA. I'm trying to think if there's anyone in the history of the Rhodes Scholar program who later went to Yale and did not get directly involved with the CIA. You definitely indirectly got involved. But is there anyone who was not CIA after going through the Rhodes Scholar program and then Yale? I think it's impossible. I think you have to sign like some blood oath. Now, she's a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, which we've talked about many times. The Carnegie Endowment is one of the center nodes, along with NED and the Atlantic Council, at the heart of the censorship industrial complex. The Carnegie Endowment is just unbelievable in terms of its broad-spanning influence and the dirty work that it does. If you speak Portuguese and you listen to my 5.5-hour presentation to the Brazilian Senate Foreign Relations Committee last summer, you'll see all the things that the Carnegie Endowment did. It was fucking crazy. Now, the Carnegie Endowment, as we've covered many times, just go to Bill Burns' bio. This is Bill Burns, Biden's director of the Central Intelligence Agency. Where did he come from? Well, he started off, I read his his biography, his autobiography, I think, called The Back Channel. Quite an interesting book, where he describes his rise from being the head of the political section in the U.S. Embassy in Moscow, rising up to being the ambassador. Now, the head of the political section is the CIA section of the State Department. So he was the head of the Bill Burns never worked at the CIA a day in his life, and yet he was tapped to be the CIA director. How does that happen? Don't you think someone with no CIA experience should maybe be an assistant or a deputy before they're made the head of the whole organization if they've never worked there before in their life? Well, that's not really the case with Bill Burns. It's not really correct to say that he was never CIA. His whole career was in the political affairs section of the State Department, which is the CIA division of the State Department. The CIA was created to undertake, quote, organized political warfare. The Political Affairs Bureau of the State Department is the political warfare side of state. So as we covered in the JFK files, and I'll just play this clip that I posted today, the Political Affairs Bureau of the State Department is its most CIA branch. The JFK files listed 48% of State Department political affairs staff as CIA under diplomatic cover. Bill Burns was the head of the State Department's political affairs branch, then became CIA chief. Victoria Nuland was head of the political affairs branch at the State Department, is now on the board of directors at NED. On the day of JFK's inauguration, 48% of all State Department, quote, employees in the political section were not actually State Department employees at all. They were CIA under diplomatic cover. While they were parked at a U.S. embassy, they did not answer in the chain of command within the State Department. They were covert operatives for organized political warfare being carried out by the CIA, but because they dominated the political section of the State Department, they could set their own political policy for the country. If the State Department did not want to overthrow that regime, but the CIA did, then the CIA could simply use the bandwidth of the political section of the embassy to make contact with the various dissident groups, to run money to them, to help them logistically, to connect them, and run a parallel operation without it observing the typical White House National Security Council chain of command. And he gave examples where he said in some embassies, 80% of the political affairs staff are CIA, not even State Department at all. So Bill Burns, back in the 1990s, right when we won the Cold War, he was the head of the political section of the most important embassy in the world, the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. So he was basically the head of coordinating the State Department and the CIA inside of Russia, right when the Cold War ended. Then he became the ambassador. By the way, the head of the political affairs at any embassy is the number 3 post. They become chargé d'affaires, head of the embassy, if the ambassador and the deputy ambassador are out. So then he became the U.S. ambassador to Russia. Then he became the undersecretary of state for political affairs. So he was the top dog of the CIA side of the State Department. And then he became DepSec. But what did he do in between that period? He went from running the CIA division of the State Department. He leaves in 2014. What does he do in between? Wow. What? Did I refer to it too many times? This is recent. As of a month ago, I could still go to this page. They scrubbed his profile. Shady. Shika, shika, shika. Slim Shady. Very strange. Let's go to the Wayback Machine. They didn't like me screen capping it too much, huh? I screen capped it too many times, maybe. So from 2014 to 2021, Bill Burns was the head of the Carnegie Endowment from 2014 to 2021. So he goes from running the CIA side of the State Department to running the CIA itself. And for 7 years in between that, he ran the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. And Rachel Kleinfeld, board of directors at the National Endowment for Democracy, has for the past many years now been a senior fellow at the institute run by the CIA director, head of the CIA. If you remember, what's his name? Eric Ciamarello? Remember the CIA guy whose name was Voldemort? Name banned on Twitter. Remember this guy? You weren't allowed to say his name. It was illegal under the Twitter terms of service to mention the name Eric Ciaramella, the CIA whistleblower behind the Trump impeachment. Where do you think he ended up? Oh, he ended up, just like Rachel Kleinfeld, as a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Focused on Eurasia, just like Dan Fried, just like Victoria Nuland, just like Rachel Kleinfeld. Same position, senior fellow as Rachel Kleinfeld. Just like NED is CIA, Carnegie is CIA. And British. It's all British. Even Bill Burns was Oxford, just like Rachel Kleinfeld. Oxford University. The Oxford connection. They all worked with the Oxford Internet Institute to coordinate the transatlantic censorship. So Rachel Kleinfeld was also very influential. I just put up this post. She led the public charge to arrest Trump, mass arrest Trump supporters, bankrupt pro-Trump conservative news outlets with Lawfare, and coerce social media to censor your speech. She's currently on the board of directors of NED. Now, I want to read a little bit from this article that we've shown before on stream in our Lawfare series. She wrote this very influential, highly cited piece, this white paper in September 2022, which the Carnegie Endowment has scrubbed from its website, but I have preserved in a web archive, probably because they wanted to continue to get USAID funding. Thought it was a little weird that they were calling for the arrest of Donald Trump and then asking him for more money. It's called 5 Strategies to Support U.S. Democracy. And again, they're funded by the State Department and USAID, as well as the British version of the State Department, the UK Foreign Office. The whole thing is CIA MI6 coordination of NGOs. Okay, the NGOs are the paid pawns, the hitmen for hire. Well, who directs the hitmen and tells them what to do? The Carnegie Endowment, the National Endowment for Democracy, the Atlantic Council. The government does not want to direct them directly because then that creates a problem called plausible deniability. If there's an email, if there's a written communication, if there's a secretly recorded conversation between the director of the CIA and an NGO, with the CIA telling the person to do that, that person can record that conversation, go to the New York Times or Newsmax or whoever side of the political aisle they're on, and there goes your covert operation. So you need a layer in between the CIA and the NGO plex. And that layer is occupied by NED, the Atlantic Council, the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, the Wilson Center. There's about 24 of these major institutions. Brookings and Carnegie is one of the biggest, the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. I think it was the first ever so-called think tank, to fill that role. Now, this is in September 2022. When did Trump announce his run for the president? November. So he announced in November 2022. So 2 months before that, in anticipation of that, Rachel Kleinfeld, board director at the National Endowment for Democracy and senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment, writes a piece about how to destroy not just Trump, but the entire Trump movement to get the Republican Party back in the box of Nikki Haley, John McCain. You'll note a startling similarity between what we're about to read and the appendix that we went over in that viral clip we did from a stream on the Transition Integrity Project, preventing a disrupted presidential election, right? Where the whole thing called for, in case of a clear Trump win, get racial justice activists and Antifa to take to the streets in the event of a clear Trump win. Clear Trump win, we have to have mobs on the streets, anarchists. We need to get California to secede from the nation. We need to do a slate of alternate electors. Alternate electors, the very thing that they indicted 19 Trump people over, they plotted to do if Trump won. And they said that, we're just wargaming this, but the annex gave it away, because the annex to this was about, will Trumpism survive a Trump loss? And the whole thing was about the problem that even if Trump lost the election, he's cultivated, Trumpism is likely to survive Trump even after he leaves office, if he loses, or if he wins and we steal it from him, because he's cultivated and mobilized a significant base. And so what they sought to do, the Transition Integrity Project, just pull these up again, but we went over this many times, but do it again. What the Transition Integrity Project offered as recommendations in June 2020, 5 months before the election, while planning to overthrow the election if Trump won it, using color revolution street protests to force the popular vote winner instead of the Electoral College. Truth and Reconciliation Commissions to do mass arrests of leaders of the Trump movement. Get rid of the tradition of legal immunity or pardons to past presidents so that we can indict Trump. So 5 months before the election, they were already planning to arrest Trump and high-level Trump officials to stop Trumpism from surviving Trump being out of office. And then called for a robust, intentional, and specific strategy to eliminate the networks that enabled Trump's rise to power. Hey, that's us. This base will not automatically demobilize if and when Trump leaves office. And it's inimical to our pluralistic democracy. So demobilize us. Stop us from voting for a Trump-like candidate. They were afraid of the extraordinary degree of de facto power that a shadow president could wield. And there's a great piece in here. I'm trying to see where it is, where there's a great thing in here where it says, and more Trump-style candidates will likely stack Congress if we don't do something to kill Trumpism beyond killing Trump. If things get worse, it gets more like that a Trump-like figure will again be a serious contender. We can't merely hope that Republicans in Congress or state elected office will come to their senses. Judicial nominations, they're afraid that basically there'll be more sort of early MTG style, Matt Gaetz style congressmen. Now, this very same, as I pointed out, this very same Transition Integrity Project memo called, if Trump won the election, for Team Biden to provoke a breakdown on January 6th. They role-played in the event of a clear Trump win that what they would do is provoke a breakdown on January 6th. This is in June 2020. Now, you'll note that this idea of taking massive action to destroy the entire Trump movement so that Trumpism goes away and the Republican Party is back to John McCain and Mitt Romney. You'll note how similar that is to what we're about to read with NED board member, current sitting NED board member, Rachel Kleinfeld. And if it sounds so familiar, it's worth noting that the Transition Integrity Project, which did this coup plot about organizing massive street protests, a secessionist movement, and alternate electors to steal the election from Trump if he won fair and square. If that sounds similar to what you're about to see from Rachel Kleinfeld in her 5 Strategies white paper, published right before Trump announced his run for the presidency in 2022, it's because Rachel Kleinfeld serves on the board of Protect Democracy. The Transition Integrity Project was not a standalone entity. It was a project run under the auspices of Protect Democracy. So this was Rachel Kleinfeld's organization who ran the Transition Integrity Project. It was under the auspices of the group where she's a member of the board. So a project spawned out under her group, literally planned mass riots to overthrow the government if Trump won the election. And she's currently on the board of NED that we just gave $315 million. Now, here is what she writes in this now deleted, but at the time highly influential white paper. American democracy is at a dangerous inflection point. This is September 2022. We need a change in strategy. Otherwise, we could become like India and Hungary. Because remember, they wanted to regime change Modi. If you remember the Greta Thunberg hilarious leaked rent-a-riot attempt with the farmers' protest. And they keep trying to regime change Viktor Orban in Hungary. Our system is creaky. Our institutions are under attack. This paper has 4 parts. International markers of Freedom House, which I sit on the board of too, says democracy's in decline. We're democratic backsliding. Open your butthole. polarization. People are disagreeing with us. 5 strategies with concrete tactics to alter the current disintegration because people are supporting Trump. Enable responsible conservatives to vote for democracy. So again, she's a Democrat. As she'll explicitly say, part of the strategy is to help Democrats win. Current board member at NED that the Republican Congress, Republican Senate just gave $315 million to help Democrats win. Just going to let that sit for a second. Republicans in the House and Republicans in the Senate voted with 100% of the Democrats to give $315 million to this organization where a key board member just straight up says activities that are crucial are helping Democrats win. This is what Republicans are funding. Just let that wash over you. But the idea is we're going to create this coalition of Democrats as a bloc and then the minority of John McCain-style Mitt Romney conservatives in a coalition. Well, wouldn't you know, that's exactly who just voted for NED funding. A third of the Republican Party and 100% of Democrats. So court John McCain, Nikki Haley, I mean, you know the list, Adam Kinzinger, Liz Cheney, that whole, right? Reduce the social demand from the right for politicians like Trump, as you'll see. That's what this means. Strengthen accountability to reset norms on what behavior is legal and acceptable. Now, Trump would announce his run for presidency 2 months later, and then 4 months later would be indicted. And what Rachel Kleinfeld, current NED board member, calls for is to reset the norms around rule of law so that we can arrest Donald Trump. This is who Republicans are funding. Haven't you seen the Varieties of Democracy Index charts? I was just looking at this at the White House earlier. This is so funny. She's talking about VDEM. You go to the homepage of VDEM, you go to their democracy reports. Wow, surprise, surprise. The report for 2025 is called 25 Years of Autocratization. Democracy trumped? Don't you see? The totally independent, nonpartisan NGO VDEM says Trump's a threat. That proves he's a threat to democracy. My sock puppet said so. The United States is backsliding, Democrat backsliding. He'd opened its butthole. Freedom House, funded by the Biden government, says we've been on a downward trajectory during the Trump years. Wow, that's crazy. She also sits on the board of Freedom House. Since the Republicans' Tea Party revolution, a supposedly populist upsurge, altered the power structure of the party, extremist social media groups, 21% of Republican state legislators joined extremist social media groups. It's no longer the party of Reagan, nor is it the party of Liz Cheney. We have to change that. This is why 30% of Republicans voted to give NED funding. They want the party of Liz Cheney back too, 30% of them. It's darn QAnon. There's doubt about our election. So what she goes on to say here, let me see how long this thing is. So here are the suggested tactics. This is Rachel Kleinfeld, current board member at the National Down for Democracy we just gave $315 million to. Here is how to eliminate Trumpism. The Donald Trump presidency, the Donald Trump executive branch is giving $315 million to be directed by this woman, even though her plan is primarily to help Democrats win. Help Democrats win. Get enough Republicans to become never Trump Republicans or never Trumpism Republicans by supporting those anti-Trumpism Republicans with money, fusion voting, cross-party voting to ensure Trumpist candidates in the Republican Party. So this is like have George Soros sponsor Nikki Haley's campaign and have Democrats register as Republicans during Republican primaries. She encourages mass defamation lawsuits to bankrupt Republicans, Trump Republicans. You'll see a lot more on that in a bit. Just a tactic. No particular defamation in mind. Just do mass defamation lawsuits. Exactly what we saw. The Dominion lawsuit, the Alex Jones lawsuit. You saw a wave of defamation lawsuits. Ray Epps even filed a defamation case, which he lost. Nina Jankowicz filed a defamation case against conservatives, which she lost. Create a branded identity apart from Trump. That's the immediate stuff. Immediately do mass defamation lawsuits to bankrupt them and immediately fund Never Trump Republicans. How about the medium to long term? Reduce the salience of primaries and safe seats via ranked choice voting so that pro-Trump candidates can be beaten by their own side. Reduce the salience of primaries in the Republican Party so that you can't vote your way out of what the Blob wants as a Republican. Accountability, pursue criminal and civil lawsuits. Now, again, she defines extremism as Trumpism. She defines Trump as an anti-democratic force and Trumpism as an anti-democratic movement. So mass criminal and civil lawsuits against us. Ensure professional accountability for Trump supporters. And what you'll see she means by that is disbarring people from their vocations. She advocates disbarring Trump lawyers, any legal professionals for the Trump movement. This is who he gave $315 million to just now. What does she mean by reducing the social demand for pro-Trump movements? Again, she defines Trump as the anti-democratic, illiberal candidate and Trumpism as an anti-democratic, illiberal movement, which gives rise to democratic backsliding and illiberalism. So flood the zone by having the government, USAID, Internews, to just give huge amounts of money, Media Viability Accelerator, media sustainability programs, to give their own newspapers shit tons of money, and regulate social media and gaming. Social media platforms and gaming platforms, because she describes video games as a vector to right-wing pro-Trump extremism. Regulate social media to reduce the demand for Trumpism. Current NED board member Rachel Kleinfeld. As we mentioned, regulate social media, build mass campaigns to inoculate against misinformation. Primary reform, create a new identity for conservative Republicans. There must be a brand identity and social group one can belong to so that a regular voter, candidate, or public official does not have to fear being painted as a rhino. This is the problem, she says, which is that right now in the Trumpist movement, if someone sides with us, the Blob, the CIA pass-through entity, the Carnegie Endowment that she's representing, this is on the Carnegie Endowment's website under their letterhead, which the Trump administration stupidly funded too, so that you're not a rhino for backstabbing Trump. She talks about Liz Cheney, the calamity of her being shamed, shunned, and punished. Cindy McCain. So help Democrats win and have the Blob astroturf the Never Trump side of the Republican Party. What do you think's happening at IRI at NED? The Republican branch of NED. Oh, NED's bipartisan. How could it be against the Republican Party? It's not. It's against the Trump wing of it. And we elected Trump. Let me just read a couple of these. Friggin' wild. Change the information space by fighting misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. It's their business models. We need to have Congress crack down on their business models. Sounds just like NED's Chris Walker. We need to fundamentally change the economics of the news industry. Europe, social media is not as bad. Well, because Europe censors the internet. The problem is also cable news. Remember, at this time, they're suing Fox News. Defamation, trying to bankrupt Fox News with defamation lawsuits. There are extremely negative democratic effects from far right and right wing television, such as Newsmax, OAN, and Fox. It's not just social media. And what you'll see that she calls for, Fox News, OAN, and Newsmax, we have to get rid of mis and disinformation there. So what does she say to do about it, huh? What she says to do about it is to bankrupt them. Current NED board member Rachel Kleinfeld said use civil impact litigation to try to bankrupt anti-democratic groups and media organizations such as the Gateway Pundit and One American News Network, that appear to assist in the spread of disinformation. This is the CIA speaking through the Carnegie Endowment for National Peace, run by the CIA director, Bill Burns. One of its senior power players, Rachel Kleinfeld, who is on the board of the National Endowment for Democracy as we speak, calling, as Trump was announcing his run for president, someone has to file civil impact litigation to bankrupt the Gateway Pundit and One American News for the purpose of crushing Trumpism, the movement, and making people vote for John McCain again. Pursue criminal lawsuits. Gee, did we see that? Ensure professional responsibility. Remember I said, look at what she means by professional accountability, such as being disbarred for lawyers. Other professional norm-setting bodies should be used to hold members accountable. This is what the 65 Project was. Disbarring all the lawyers using the professional norm-setting bodies like the bar associations. The California State Bar Association to get their law license pulled in California. The New York State Bar Association to get their law licenses pulled in New York. For what? For the high crime and misdemeanor of representing your client who happens to be the president of the United States? Well, if the president of the United States is Donald Trump, CIA open spigot Rachel Kleinfeld calls for mass disbarments of Trump's lawyers. This whole piece, remember, is about how to kill Trumpism. 5 ways to kill Trumpism, because Trumpism is an attack on democracy. It's anti-democratic. So when she says anti-democratic, she means pro-Trump. And this is exactly what they all pursued. Norm Eisen, the 65 Project. This is a board. It's not like some low-level rank and file person at the National Endowment for Democracy. This is a member of the board of directors. Get creative with long-term legal theories that'll permanently change the way our legal system works to stop Trumpism. Stack the Supreme Court and help Democrats win. A number of theories may be executed as good faith. Yeah, sure, we'd like to appear nonpartisan. What we really want to do is help Democrats win until the Republican Party becomes pro-democratic again. So until we still need to pretend that we're nonpartisan, you shouldn't be looking to, explicitly look like we're a partisan thing because we get money from a Republican Congress. And in 2022, you have a Republican House of Representatives. But we should really be trying to help Democrats win until they run Nikki Haley or the ghost of John McCain again. But it's not enough to just help Democrats win. We need to create a Coke and Pepsi so that the Republican Party gets back in the box. And what's really funny is she wrote another piece in 2021. You'll see, I don't know if Rachel Kleinfeld was directly involved in the Transition Integrity Project. I don't recall seeing her in the list of names, but I would be shocked if she wasn't. And it was her organization, Protect Democracy, that spun out the project. And the Transition Integrity Project was calling for lawfare to arrest Trump somehow anyway, bring any sort of criminal suit just to get rid of Trumpism in 2020. In 2021, Rachel Kleinfeld called for states to prosecute Trump to avoid the backlash of the optics, quote, the optics of the Biden federal government leading it. And that's exactly what happened. The first indictments came from New York and then came from Georgia. So it didn't look as much like, oh, it was Biden persecuting. Here's her piece. Profound rebuilding need to shore up democracy. Offset the optics of a political witch hunt. For Trump himself, prosecution through federal law is probably fruitless, even if he has likely broken laws. Is certainly likely to enrage his many followers who will believe any charges are politically motivated. Accountability for crimes committed at the state level may be a wiser path forward, and that's exactly what they did. All the initial charges came from the New York State Attorney General rather than the Justice Department. Came from the state of Georgia's Attorney General. And she's saying you do this because of optics. It's fucking sick. And this is who we just gave $315 million to. And then she gets to vote on Damon Wilson's salary, so he makes more from our tax. We give more tax dollars to Damon Wilson than we give to Donald Trump. All right. Well, that's enough on the board for right now. Let's. The main thing I wanted to get to tonight are the Project Democracy documents. I feel like I need a shower after that.
Fool said I, you do not